Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 854. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, we feature an essay on the linkage between accountability, responsibility, performance, and freedom. In our ongoing Reread Saturdays series, currently featuring Amartya Sen's Development is Freedom, we found a compelling connection between Sen's insight and this week's discussion on personal accountability and performance. Specifically, Chapter 12's exploration of the interdependence between freedom and responsibility resonates deeply with the core concepts of this essay. We also have a visit from Susan Parente. In this installment of Not A Scumdamentalist, we discuss accountability. Fancy that. Remember, the Software Process and Measurement Cast is sponsored by Mastering Work Intake. Look at your to-do list and tell me your work intake process is perfectly balanced. Buy a copy of Mastering Work Intake. Your work-life balance will improve. By the way, Keyan Reid bought a copy and wrote a review titled An Actionable Approach to a Difficult Problem. A link in the show notes to the review. Buy a copy. Links in the show notes to both Amazon and the publisher J. Ross. By the way, interested in continuing the conversation on work intake with peers in a safe place? Join the Mastering Work Intake community on LinkedIn. Link in the show notes. We look forward to being involved in that conversation. Responsibility by Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. In our ongoing Reread Saturday series, currently featuring Amartya Sen's Development is Freedom, we found a compelling connection between Sen's insights and this week's discussion on personal accountability and performance. Specifically, Chapter 12's exploration of the interdependence between freedom and responsibility resonates deeply with the core concepts of our essay. For those unfamiliar with Development is Freedom, Amartya Sen, a Nobel laureate in economics, defines freedom as a network of interconnected liberties that empower individuals to improve their lives. He posits that freedom is the ultimate aim of economic development. To clarify our terms, responsibility signifies the duty associated with the authority and control, implying accountability for subsequent outcomes. Personal accountability entails taking ownership of one's choices and actions, eschewing blame, and actively seeking to rectify errors, as highlighted in Susan Parente's I'm Not A Scumdamentalist column this week. Performance, simply put, is the execution of a task or function. These concepts are intricately linked. Freedom to be constructive necessitates a consideration of consequences. Unbridled freedom without the responsibility breeds anarchy. While ethical boundaries are essential, excessive constraints can stifle growth and the capacity for immediate responsible action. The notion that individuals solely pursue personal gains overlooks the vital role of responsibility, which, if neglected, leads to societal disorder. A balanced system demands that individuals be held accountable for their choices, ensuring that freedom is tempered by responsibility. Furthermore, responsibility serves as the foundational duty, while accountability is its active manifestation. Personal accountability, therefore, is the tangible demonstration of fulfilled responsibility. When individuals own their actions, they embody personal responsibility. Accountability, in turn, fuels performance. It provides the impetus to strive toward excellence, take initiative, and learn from setbacks. These elements, freedom, responsibility, performance, and accountability, form a dynamic feedback loop. Altering any component ripples through the entire system. Expanding freedom within reasonable limits empowers individuals. Fostering responsibility aligns actions with ethical principles. Accountability energizes performance and improvement. Positive performance, in turn, reinforces the value of freedom and responsibility, creating a virtuous cycle. Thoughts, comments, all welcome? Please feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com. We look forward to the conversation. Susan Parente, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Always wonderful to be here.
Susan, this is, when you reschedule this to 7 o'clock in the morning, if it hadn't been you, if it hadn't been the conversations we tend to have, I might have said, well, let's reschedule, because it would have gotten in the way of my running and oatmeal for the morning.
Well, oatmeal, I do the oatmeal part, not the running. But yeah, weather got in the way of your running anyway, so it all worked out.
It did. And I'm addicted to both of these, I think, now. By the way, oatmeal with a little bit of cinnamon on it, because the cinnamon's also good for other things like your cholesterol. Yep. Susan, today,
yes,
we as leaders, as project managers, as coaches, things like that, or we help people discover how they should work. We may even design processes. Dan Ariely had a recent video that suggested that in many cases, like cars, we've made things over time much safer without really impinging on a lot of freedoms or capabilities that people have. Whereas other things, we've not gone down that path. Do we as leaders and ethically have the charge to make work safer or make the processes that we're dealing with safer to work with?
It's an interesting question. I think it comes down to accountability. I think the reason that vehicles are safer are due to regulations, which is fine. The work that we do, like particularly software development, is not really regulated, I would say. I mean, if you think about electrical engineer, plumber, if you're getting renovations or a house built, those things are regulatory. Like they get inspected and they have to pass certain inspections or you don't move on. We don't have anything like that in software development. Some of it is, I think people underestimate the harm that software can cause, right? So this really becomes like a cybersecurity thing, right? So what's the harm that software can cause? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's more than cybersecurity. Having been many times working in the medical world, you have a and unfortunately, this happens. So, and I think we sweep this under the carpet. You have a malfunction, a software glitch, and the pumps stop working. I remember one in an organization that I was at that the MRI machine stopped working, and therefore no one in a very large chain got treated for stroke for 6 or 7 hours, which means a lot of people never got the drugs that were required to reverse the stroke. So people die, not only cybersecurity stuff, which is really bad too, because people die there too, but there are also other physical outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, what I've seen in the industry, being in IT pretty much since my graduation from college, although I spent a little bit of time
3 or 4
telecom,
weeks ago, right?
So how the years pass. So I think the focus is so much on delivering product, making money. I don't think that we often think about that, and we ought to. And the other part, which I think is separate, is just personal accountability. One of the things, I'm self-employed, and accountability is something I have and exercise every day. I don't see that with everybody I know who's salaried. Even senior people, I feel like there's a little bit of punching in and punching out and not really owning what they're doing. maybe that's judgmental on my part. I don't know if that resonates with you, but I just, I know that my level of accountability is very different. I think it's because I'm a business owner, even when I'm working for other people, even if I'm working part-time as a university employee, regardless of what I'm doing, like I don't once you're accountable, you don't not exercise that everywhere. Like I don't think you turn that off. It's not possible, which is why having entrepreneurs work for you I think is a really valuable thing because, you know, I'm I'm honest, I own what I do. I don't know. I don't necessarily see that in employees and maybe it's just, they're like, "Okay, well I don't want to rustle any feathers. I just want to get my work done and, yeah, this probably is problematic, but if I bring it up, like I don't know how that's going to be taken." And I just see some of that apathy maybe about all of that. And then, honestly, you bring things up to senior management and senior leadership and you know, a lot of companies are just focused on the bottom line, which to me, obviously, this accountability to society, to people should be part of your bottom line, but not everybody is long-sighted. They often look in the short game. I think that's why that's a gap. And I think you're right, like in the medical industry, that's definitely there. I think there's unfortunately like a level of acceptability that, oh, well, sometimes things don't work and it was really nobody's fault. And like I don't I don't really agree with that. I mean, maybe it's not one person's fault, but like I think that we need to take more responsibility for that. And I just maybe it's just a general societal thing that we're going through right now. I'm really not like I'm curious, like, what social psychologists would say about it, but I feel like there was more ownership for doing a good job regardless of where you were. Like, even if you're, like, the bottom of the hierarchy, I feel that there was more ownership in the days of my parents working than now. I feel like there's less ownership. I don't know if that's something that you see.
Now, I don't know, and I don't know if there's, if I've seen data on that. How do you I mean, I like the idea of personal accountability. How do you define personal accountability?
The big thing that I'm always defining with people I work with is accountability and responsibility. And one of the ways it comes up, like when I teach project management, I teach the RACI, responsible, accountable, consultant, informed. So, what's the difference between these? Like, I think people interchange those words often. So I'll do like a project management definition because that's the one I'm familiar with. So as a project manager, we're really accountable for everything to do with the project, but we're not responsible for doing everything because we just can't do everything. So responsibility is what somebody's actually doing, the work they're doing. Accountable is to ensure that that work is done and done properly. So there are things that we're both accountable and responsible for, but there are also many things that we're accountable for but not responsible for. So, let's say as a homeowner, if I have somebody repair something in my home, I'm not responsible for the repair, but I am accountable. So like if for some reason it isn't done properly and it causes some other harm to my home, like I'm still overall like impacted by that, right? So there's obviously I could sue the person if they did something wrong or whatever, but like, just sort of buyer beware kind of thing, like if you have a HVAC person come over and fix something, hey, what did you do? Can you explain what you did? Is there something I should look for to make sure that that is still working properly? Should I call you if this or that happens? That's being accountable. It's not like you have to have all the knowledge of the skills of the person who's responsible, but overall, making sure that everything's working and done the way that it ought to be. If you're paying for something, then you usually are automatically feel some accountability because you want to get value for what you paid for, right?
All right. Okay. So that's a good definition. If multiple people are accountable for the same thing, who then owns it? That's where I get sort of
Yes.
muddied. It's like, okay, I did the testing on this, but you're the project manager, so it's your fault. I'm out of here.
It could feel like that. So
Well,
this
it
is
shouldn't though,
why,
right? I mean, that's
yeah.
just bad.
Well, that's why in a RACI chart, so responsible, accountable, consultant, informed, I like to have names, not roles, and not departments, because there is a push for like, oh, well, that's such and such department, like that's the testing department. So you really need to have a name for people to be accountable. And yes, that is challenging when there's multiple people working on something. And if let's say a tester tests something and they don't test it fully or don't do the work properly, there is an accountability with that responsibility, but then there's the overall accountability for the project. And in general, when looking at projects, I try to focus on what is the process that we use and not make it about people, because I don't think people wake up in the morning and say, what am I going to do to screw things up?
Oh, I do.
Um,
That's what I did the first thing I got up this morning at 4:00 in the morning, or actually it was 3:45. And I said, I got out of the bed and I said, what can I do to break something in this house today? Well, okay, maybe I didn't do that.
we got to look at what our processes and do they support people in doing the right things and doing them well. Like it becomes like a quality management thing, right? It's like, are we doing the right things? And then are we doing them properly? Right? Because we could be doing things properly, but they're not the right things. And I find a lot of times like that's what's missing in a process. Like people follow a process, but it isn't a good process, that they should have a different process there. And that would resolve some things, right?
So that gets us back to, should we have engineered the process to be safer?
I mean, I think we should, but I think that there's like, first of all, there's about identifying risks, and I think we do it poorly. So if we were all better at risk identification, we would know where safety issues are. So we don't know about it because we're not doing that. And then the second part is, how much do we care? And like I said, I do a lot of work for federal contractors in the DC area, and a lot of them are just like profitability. And it's like, all right, what about reputation? I'll give you an example. I worked for Census Bureau, and I actually did risk management there as a program risk manager. And one of the things I saw is a high focus on the reputation of Census Bureau when it comes to any surveys or any censuses that they do. Always a question as to how
to
the plural
pluralize
of
that?
census. Yes. I mean, I worked there for a few years and we never said censi, so I'm pretty sure it's censuses. But they're very concerned about reputation, and the reason they're concerned about reputation is that if people don't trust the data that they provide census, then census's data is junk, right? So they do a really good job of being, responsible about the data management and accountable for the impacts to our entire country on that. But that's because they see that as part of their bottom line. Now they're obviously like not, Census Bureau is not a profit. It's a government organization.
But Gallup, which does a lot of, it's not the census, but Gallup does a lot of data gathering and polling and things like that. That is a for-profit organization. And I'm going to guess they have that same view, that if they're seen to be messing up the data collection or any of that, that would trash their reputation and it would kill their company. So I see the need on both sides for on that sort of view of a risk.
Yeah, but I don't, as like working for contract companies, I'm not going to say they're all this way, but a lot of them are just like, hey, are we profitable? Like, unless
What's
it's
the
like an
billability
absurd.
rate that we're getting?
What's that?
What's the billability time rate we're getting?
Exactly, the billability, yes, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, you give 10 years and the ones that think that way will be gone. They'll be either acquired or fall apart.
I'd
However,
rather they fall apart because, very frankly, them getting
yes,
acquired means somebody gets a real decent payout, and that means that behavior gets reinforced.
again, there's a lot of them, and I'm not saying they're all like that, but if that's it's the funny thing is it's not, you can say, "Oh, well, they just care about the bottom line, making money," but so they say that it's, the bottom line is about making money. But the thing is that if you're not concerned about these risks, then it's going to affect how you're viewed as a vendor. It's going to affect future, new business. It's going to affect profitability. So it's like it just doesn't make sense to do that. Not to mention, there's sites like Glassdoor where if people aren't appreciated, a lot of people, especially younger generation, will go look there before they go get a job. And how are employees treated? What are people saying about working there? So those are factors too. I mean, even if your customer is happy with you, but you can't hire people because everybody knows you're just a bottom line company that cares about making money and doesn't care about their staff. Yeah, so it's short sighted. But unfortunately, short sighted does actually work in the short term. It just doesn't work in the long term. But I think that that's a lot of it. And the fact that it's not regulated. I mean, software development, when
But parts
when
of
do
it
you
are,
see?
right? Parts of it are. I recently, hasn't gone up on the podcast yet, but I interviewed a gentleman named Mike Paciello, who is the chief accessibility officer for what's the name of the place? Audio Eye, and very involved in the whole work, the World Wide Web Consortium and all of the standards around accessibility. And I think most of that are standards, not regulations. And I asked him the question, because he's been in the business for a while, since the 1980s, last century.
Mhm. That's a
I
while.
said, I pointed out to him that we are a quarter all the way into this century. So we've been talking about and working on things like accessibility, which is, again, it's a safety, it's a capability that we should have so that people can actually work and spend money and do all those other things. But we're still talking about it. It's not really there a quarter of the way into this century still. And he said he hated the question. He hated to be asked that question. But that's the problem, right? Maybe it is. It needs to be mandated or regulated because standards don't necessarily cut it.
Yeah, but there's also, I think about it in like the software development arena. It's like, you know, um, there's some balance there. It's like between regulation and creativity. So, like, if you think about things like open source, like, we get so much farther in technology and everything we do when things are open source because they're not regulated, because there's a lot of freedom and a lot of creativity there. And so I love that. And also there do need to be some bounds in some places. Somewhat because people just really aren't aware. I don't think that even like, take a software developer, I don't think that they're thinking about cutting corners actually resulting in harm to people, right? You know what I mean? Like I don't think people think that largely.
No, I
I
agree.
think
I
they're like,
agree with you. I don't think anybody's going out there going, I'm going to create this technical debt. And let's face it, we have a word for this, which means it's pretty rife. I'm
yeah,
not creating this technical debt so that so that the car will spin off the road, albeit our
Yeah.
friend John Quigley can tell us stories about corners that got cut and resulted in massive recalls after people died, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But nobody, I don't think, went out of their way to make that happen.
Yeah. I don't think people think about, it's funny. It's like, in some sense, I think we think in general that we're more important than we are. And then in another sense, I think we don't realize how important we are, like in different ways, right? So we're reality is, if you die tomorrow, like there's a bunch of people who will care and other people who won't even know anything happened, right? But on the other hand, the little things you do, like saying thank you to your barista and wishing them a nice day, like is hugely like important. So like the little things matter more, and the big things that we think we do matter less. And so in the same way, I think, cutting a corner here or there, like not realizing like the ramifications of that, I think are pretty huge. And I don't know how to fix that. I mean, I think some of it is just awareness. Like I said, I want to say that it comes to risk management, but I'm also a risk management SME, so it's like I'm always sniffing around for where risk management could be missing, and I think that is missing, and that's what's causing some of that. Like, but it's also accountability, and maybe performance should also be attached to accountability. I mean, like not just did you deliver, but
did you deliver well?
Well, and like was quality met? And one of the things, like it didn't happen necessarily in my 20s. I was probably more defensive when I made mistakes, but now when I make a mistake, I'm like, I really should have done da da da. And I've learned that I'm a better leader when I admit my failings right away instead of being defensive about it, because defensiveness doesn't really solve the problem anyway.
No, it just re-entrenches everything. Absolutely.
Yeah, I wish I would do it everywhere. I mean, I'll be honest, like in interpersonal relationships, like, my reaction is still to be defensive, but in the workplace, if somebody's like, hey, da 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 wasn't done, like, my bad, you're right, I should have done that. And that's just because I care about the end result and achieving the goal. And if I'm going to be defensive, I'm going to be farther away from achieving that goal. So I look at it from a very pragmatic sense that to just be accountable. And it's funny, I just did an annual review with one of my clients, like where I work there, and they do a review. And so in this review, there was nothing around accountability. It was about performance. Like, this is your goal. Did you deliver that? But what about being accountable in the delivery of it? And I don't think we look at that. But if we think about who we love to be on our team, it's people who are accountable for the things that they do.
Absolutely. Susan, if people wanted to continue the conversation, this is a very deep, ethical, character-driven, accountable performance. All of those things work together. If they wanted to have that conversation with you, how do they find out about Susan Parente? Where would they go looking for her?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I show up as being in the DC area. I can't put that I'm in multiple areas, but that's mostly where I do my work. And you can also email me. It's Parente, parent with an E, S as in Sam, the number 3 -tec.com. And I'd love to hear from you. And if there's also like topics that you'd like for Tom and I to talk about, let us know there. Find me on LinkedIn and post something or send me a message. Thank you.
All right. So until next time, and there will be a next time. Yeah, this isn't the last one. All right. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Tom.
In Reread Saturday News. Opening Chapter 6 of Development is Freedom, Sen asks why bother about the finesse of political freedoms given the overpowering grossness of intense economic needs. If we wanted to boil the chapter 6 down to one sentence, the answer is that political freedoms and economic needs are connected. Without political freedoms, people have little to no avenue to pursue macroeconomic changes. Sen indicates there is little general evidence that authoritarian governance and the suppression of political and civil rights are really beneficial in encouraging economic development. An interesting topic for this day and age. Links in the show notes to this week's and all previous weeks' installments of our reread of Development as Freedom. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 855, we will feature my conversation with Keyan Reid. We talked about testing, quality assurance, control, and frameworks. Effective testing is essential for effective delivery of value. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?